Hello, hello. How are you, Yasin? All right? You good? How are you, Angie? Good?
Hello.
You okay?
Yeah, good.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. All right, we should have everybody arriving now, which is excellent. And I will just refresh that. Should bring us all up. Good. How are you, Lynn? All right?
All right.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to press on. Now, I have posted already the link to the Nearpod. So we're going to jump into the window, not out the window, into the window, and have a wee look at Nearpod. So we should be seeing 9IGFK. 9IGFK should be the code. And we will jump in there, continuing on in our investigating of the market model, and in this particular case, elasticity and what it means and how it's used. So I see we're all arriving, so that's fantastic. Remembering that the code is always up here in the top left-hand corner. All right, so a little bit of a review to start with. Dip, dip, dip. No, in fact, we'll go back one. To here. Price elasticity of demand. There you go. Fill in the blanks. Mm-hmm. Done. Looking good. Waiting on a couple. Mm-hmm. Having a go, Andy? There we go. All right. Okay, so we're going to need to review this. We need to make sure that we know our definitions. So price elasticity of demand, or PED, is the responsiveness of the quantity demanded to a change in the price of a good. We need to have it in our glossary. It needs to be a term that just rolls off our tongue, so that if anybody comes up to us in the street and says, hey, what does price elasticity of demand mean? You're able to launch into the definition saying, well, PED measures the responsiveness of the quantity demanded to a change in the price of a good or service. Because it is all about responsiveness. And we talked about how there were two different aspects to it. We could talk about a product being elastic and a product being inelastic. So a product that is going to be a good that is going to be more responsive, right, to a price change, and a good that's going to be less responsive to a price change. So the language is quite important. If we're talking about a good that is very responsive, that is very responsive to the price change, okay, then we would say it is highly elastic. If we're talking about a good that is not very responsive at all to a price change, then we would say it is relatively inelastic. We also need to be able to do a maths, a calculation, right, where PED is the percentage change in the quantity demanded, all divided by the percentage change in the price. And that equation isn't going to change. That's what you are going to have, right? For IGCSE economics, you need to know that one. There is another couple of equations that you're going to need to know over the time, but in general, just for this particular subunit, you need that one, okay? And again, it needs to be one that just very rapidly comes off the tongue, all right? It does involve you understanding how to calculate potentially a percentage change, and that has in the past become a problem for some people. Right, so if you've forgotten how to work out a percentage change, you need to make sure that you've double checked that, you look that up, and essentially it is the difference between the two numbers divided by the original number multiplied by 100 to make it a percentage, okay? And that is actually just the math. So in economics, we don't even really refer to that other than to say percentage change in quantity demanded. And as I mentioned to you, I think the other week, you can get it in two different ways. You can get it in like a word form or a number form as a question. So it might be in words. So 10% increase in quantity demanded has led to a 20% decrease. Sorry, 10% increase in quantity demanded came about as a 5% decrease in price. Right? Calculate the PED. So you do that. You work out the numbers and put them in. But it might be that you actually also have to work out the percentage change. It could be in multiple choice, in which case the answer might actually be there. It could be that it's a diagram, and that would be harder still. One of the things that you have to be able to do, like the application of this, not only is to be able to apply the formula and come out with the numbers and then explain what those numbers mean, but you're also needing to think about diagrams. You're needing to think about the demand curve itself and be able to look at it instantly and go, aha, that's an elastic one. Or look at it and go, aha, that's quite inelastic. And one of the things that we would say in New Zealand is to remember this. If it is more elastic, i.e. more responsive, it looks more like the letter E. All right, so you've got, if you imagine a line here, and going down here, and then that would be E. And then if it is more inelastic, then it looks more like the capital letter I. Right? So the more inelastic it is, the more vertical it is pointing. The more elastic it is, the more horizontal it is pointing. Which led us to, that was the formula, what if? What would the curve look like if it was perfectly elastic? And what would it look like if it was perfectly inelastic? And then we wanted you to have a write-up of that. So what do you think it would look like? All right, I think we did this the other day, so this should just be a review. If not, it's new, so away you go. What does it look like? If it is perfect. So when we say perfect, perfectly elastic is that it means it responds instantly to any change in price. And perfectly inelastic says it won't respond at all to any change in price. All right, so try and make it as simple and straightforward as you can. Okay, some ideas coming up. Good thinking, Yasin. You need to have a think about the perfectly elastic. What would it be if it was absolutely responsive? Yes, Wenching, a straight line, but there's different kinds of straight lines. They're all straight lines. Good, that's for one of them. Absolutely. What about the other? Well done, Angie. Well done. Okay, for those of us a bit stuck, there's a good answer from Isaac. Yeah, well done, Tracy. Yep, you're absolutely on the right path. Were you going for the word horrible one? No problem, yes, and I understand. Yeah, I haven't quite finished the sentence there. Yeah, it's a bit confusing there, Eve, with what you've written. You've written inelastic equals straight. Maybe we could be a bit more explanatory with that one. What do we mean? Up to 90. You having a go, Charles? Give me another minute. Okay. All right, so let's stop sharing for a second and jump back to the meet. Laptop, yeah, Charles, network problems. Okay, no problem, guys. I understand. I really do. We have similar problems here often. Okay, so you remember I mentioned just before that we had 2 letters of the alphabet. All right, that was a help with regards to explaining or just visually looking at a demand curve to figure out whether it was going to be more elastic or more inelastic. So verbally, okay, so that means talking. So you're going to be able to turn your mic on to do this. What do you think? What letter of the alphabet? What letters of the alphabet did I mention? And what does it mean with regards to elasticity? Said it a couple of minutes ago.
Mr. David, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. When we're talking about a demand curve with regards to its PED, one of the tricks, right, with regards to it is to help you work out whether it is more elastic or more inelastic, is to think about a letter of the alphabet. And there are two letters of the alphabet that I mentioned a few minutes ago that are helps, right, with regards to working out whether it is more elastic or whether it is more inelastic. So what I'd like from you is to tell me what those two letters of the alphabet were and how they would help you understand whether it is elastic or inelastic.
Oh, okay. Mr. David, does
Yeah,
it have to do with like imagining what the letters looks like?
yes.
Uh, so I'm thinking about like maybe E is
Mm-hmm.
for elastic because it has three ways of like the letter, and then I only has one straight line which is inelastic. So something like that.
Well done. Right, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm creating jam. This is called a jam. I'll turn the link sharing on. Now, so this should arrive for you, and it should look like a bit of a whiteboard. Can you see it? Does this appear on your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I can do with this is I'm going to attempt to draw at any rate. Gosh, you guys are much better at this drawing than I am. All right. So if I do this as a demand curve, then I am liable to say that this is perfectly elastic. It is 100% responsive to price changes. Response. However we spell responsive, all right, it is horizontal. All right. I can move this over here. I can make this one big, like that. So it's horizontal because you can't really change the price. Any attempt to change the price would get an immediate response in quantity. It just goes boom. All right. As soon as you tried to raise the price, quantity would just collapse. Okay. So it was 100% responsive. So therefore, quick way to think about it is that it kind of looks like the letter E. Whereas if you're thinking about something that is more inelastic, then you're liable to do something that is looking a bit like this. Oh, come on. All right. And if it is inelastic, in this particular case, it is perfectly inelastic. It won't respond to price changes at all. Response. The spelling's not very good today. It won't respond to price changes at all. So again, if I just drag that over here and make it big, so you can see it. So it doesn't matter what price you put, there's going to be no change to the demand. It's just going to sit there. Do we see that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. In the
So if you're in an exam and you're trying to work out whether it is more elastic or more inelastic, if you think about the letter, right, the letter of the alphabet, does it look more like the letter E or does it look more like the letter I? And, so then you can make that judgment about how close it is to whichever letter, and that will tell you whether it is relatively elastic or relatively inelastic. Right? We used to, you'd see them in the exam doing this, right, moving their arm around, elastic and elastic, elastic and elastic, elastic and elastic, which is quite useful when it's a hot day. That's a joke. Okay. All right, so if I get rid of that and go back to sharing screen. We use technology, we share screen. That's my attempt at a Russian accent. It kind of didn't really work. That's right. Right, we need to think about how big the number is. When you do the calculation, okay, when you come out with what in maths terms is called a coefficient, a number, an answer, so you've divided by the percentage change in the quantity demanded by the percentage change in the price, and you've come out with a number. How big that number is tells us how strong that relationship is. So you can talk about something being very elastic, which means that number is very big, okay? And of course, the biggest number that there is what number? Come on, mathematicians, what's the biggest number? Oh, what's the biggest number? 1. It's usually deemed to be the loneliest number. 2. 2 is 1 plus
100.
100?
Oh no.
No? So how big could the numbers get?
They go forever. There's no
But like
such thing as
it's
biggest number.
oh it's
Yeah.
percent.
So what is the biggest number then?
I don't know. Infinity.
Infinity.
Infinity! Woo! Thank you.
Yay.
Well done. Good
Yay.
people. Well done. Rock stars. Yeah. So when you do the calculation, the closer you get to infinity, right, means it is even more and more and more elastic. And if you remember the letter E, right, it's elastic. It's infinitely elastic. Okay, because it will change immediately, instantly. 100% responsive. All right. Whereas if it doesn't change at all, so therefore, what's the smallest positive number we can have? It's not changing at all. It is completely unresponsive. So what would that coefficient look like? What number would it be? If it doesn't change at all. Come on, mathematicians, what's the smallest positive number that there is? Smallest positive whole number.
1,
Eh.
0.
I guess technically, if you're looking at the philosophy of maths, it's not really a number, it's considered a placeholder.
Yeah.
So what would it be?
0.
0. Well done. Exactly. 0. No response. There's no response. It's like when your mum's trying to wake you up in the morning. There's no response. Come on, wake up. Yeah. No response. Yeah. So therefore, when you do the calculation and the number is 0, it's going to be perfectly inelastic. So therefore, your range of numbers that are possible for this particular equation is going to be from 0 to infinity. And the bigger the number, the more elastic. The smaller the number, the less elastic. And remember, the number 1 is going to be really important because 1 is exactly proportional. All right? So if you have 10% divided by 10%, what number do you end up with? 10 divided by 10 equals what?
1.
1, because it's exactly proportional. Okay, so a 10% quantity change and a 10% price change means that they're both moving at exactly the same percentage. It's proportional. So therefore, any number between 0 and 1 is going to be inelastic, less than proportional. Any number between 1 and infinity is going to be elastic, more than proportional. And there are going to be some, because we talk about the strength of the relationship, there are going to be some numbers that it's going to be, you know, the more you do economics, the more you'll see these sorts of weird things going on. But if it is like 1.1, okay, that is technically elastic, but it's really not very elastic, yeah. Or if it is 0.9999999, that is technically, mathematically inelastic, but yeah, it's almost proportional. So the terminology, we talk about these coefficients, right? The quantity demanded being potentially less responsive, then we would say it is inelastic. If we talk about things being more responsive, then we'd say it is elastic. So another way to say it, less than proportional, more than proportional, and exactly proportional. And when we say it is exactly proportional, excuse me, we would say it is unitary. Because the old days, in the sort of the philosophy of maths days, there's actually quite a cool book out there about the philosophy of maths. I read it a couple of years back. Yeah, I didn't understand all of it, I've got to say, but I did enjoy the bits that I read with regards to it all. Because I'm not a mathematician by any stretch of the imagination, but I do like to test myself and try and look at weird and difficult things. All right, and so part of that talked about the idea of unit being 1, because that's what you had. You had a unit of something, and the unit is 1. So therefore, unitary, exactly proportional. You've got 1. All right. Now, the sign business. So you're talking about the negative value. All right. Now, if it is negative, it's because it's a negative relationship, because we're talking about demand. So therefore, when we're calculating it, we actually discount that. We actually use what's called absolute value. All right. So your coefficient is always going to be a positive number. All right? Even though it's demand, we know that it's going to be a positive number. Now, there is weird quirkinesses, as you saw, with demand. And, you know, you could make an argument about demand curves and the slope of them. And if we are looking at an exception to demand, say something like a Giffen good, you know, what does the slope of that curve look like? You know, all of those sorts of questions. And that's a little bit above where you need to be for IGCSE. But if you're thinking about IB, which you all should be, then that's, you know, that's the sort of level of thinking that you can end up getting to. Right, that's been a bit more critical about the model in and of itself, and definitely things that you do at university or when you're writing your PhD. All right. Now, the next thing is to think about where does the number come from? What is it that's going to influence what that equation is? What is it that's going to influence whether it is elastic or whether it is inelastic? And just as we did with demand, we're thinking about determinants with regards to that. So what determines the level of elasticity of that particular product? And again, you can get multiple choice questions asking you about this. You can get short response questions asking you about it. Or it can be just that we're wanting you to think about, all right, and to analyze and apply and explain a situation that has occurred, and use the concepts, use this particular model in your explanation. So let's have a look at those determinants. There are 8 of them. Did we have a look at any of these the other day?
No, we didn't look at this.
Fantastic. So let's start. Woo, here we go. Number 1. How differentiated, fancy word, the product is. When you see the word differentiated, can you see any other words inside it? What other word is different? Yes. How different the product is. Or if you like, how unique, which is another fancy word for different. How special the product is, right? How one-off. Okay, so if anybody's been to China, and maybe some of you have, there's a place in China called the Forbidden City, which sounds like it should be in some sort of scary movie, right? And we've been there, and it isn't in a scary movie. It's just a forbidden city, okay? You go there, and it's a one-off because that's the only place in the world where that is, okay? Or if you've been to Cambodia, you've possibly gone and seen the temples in Cambodia, right? And they are unique, and each one is different, okay? And so you might go to them, and then your experience there might be very different. So we went to one of the temples there, and you had to go, and the plan was to go there before daybreak, before light came up, so that you climbed up it, and you got to the top of it just as the sun rose, so that the early morning sunshine would shine onto it, and it would go from darkness to light and all of those sorts of things. My wife's an artist, so I do those sorts of creative things from time to time. And it really was quite an experience, but that's very unique. That's a different type of experience. And those experiences that are quite unique, you tend to assume that they're going to cost you more money. All right? And if you've done anything like that, if you've gone to Thailand and visited the temples, you've climbed to the top of a mountain, right? You've done something unique, something differentiated, something very different from ordinary, I'm just going down to the shopping mall, right? If you've done something very different, okay, then that sets you apart, but you quite possibly paid a bit of money for it. So the more differentiated or the more unique a particular good or service is, the more you're going to have to pay for it. And the more potentially inelastic the demand for it is. So say, for example, it's a one-off. Right? This product is here, doesn't happen again. Yeah, like at an auction. There's one product. If you want it, you've got to pay the money for it. That's why some of those auctions, the prices can go up and up and up, thousands and thousands of dollars, sometimes millions. Yeah. There was one the other year, I don't know if you saw this, it was in the news, and it was a painting, and it was by that, because we talked about it because obviously my wife, but I found it interesting as well from an economics point of view. It was a painting by a street artist. I'm trying to remember his name now. He's the one that nobody knows who he is. Anyway, and one of his paintings went up for auction, and as it went up for auction, somebody bought it, and as soon as somebody bought it, the painting went into a shredder because it had some sort of automatic shredder machine inside the frame, and the whole thing shredded, and so all these people ran to try and stop it from going through. It was quite exciting. But it's a one-off, yeah? And if you've gone to a sporting event, like the final of the NBA, you pay the money for it because it's a one-off and never to happen again. You've gone to a music concert, again, very inelastic. You would expect that because they're not going to necessarily repeat that, okay? So that's what we mean by this idea of a differentiation of the product. How unique is the product? And people who make products, they know this, so they're going to try and make their product more different. They're going to try and make it more unique. They're going to look at what their selling, their marketing position is, and try and make you think that their product is so unique that you have to pay for it, you have to buy it. All right? Make it more inelastic. Then there's the time period involved, and we discussed this with regards to demand. That the more time you have, you, the consumer, are going to be able to find more products out there, and possibly cheaper ones. And again, businesses know this. This is why you have marketing that says, buy now, don't wait. Yeah, that's why you have those little flashing lights and buttons and things that occur on websites that say, 5 other people have looked at this and they're going to buy it. And if you don't buy it now, it's, you know, they want you to reduce that time that it takes for you to make your decision so that you make a quicker decision. Now, in IB, you get to discuss that idea in a little bit more detail about the psychology of all of that. Then there's this idea of loyalty. Some of you are absolutely loyal to particular sports franchises, shall we say, and therefore you will buy the products. Right? There's a football team, and I don't know football, but there's a football team called Manchester United. Some of you will have heard of it. It's football, right? Some of you will have heard of Manchester United, all right, or MU, which I always think is quite funny, right? Because in economics, MU is marginal utility, something you'll worry about when you get to IB. Manchester United is one of the most famous football teams in the world, and one of the reasons why it's incredibly famous, and it's been a case study for economists over the years, is the fact that quite a lot of the money, in fact nearly all of the money that the club actually earns, isn't actually from the sale of the tickets to go to the games. It's actually from the sale of the jerseys, the sweatshirts that they wear. You know, the team branded fan.
Like the merch of the team, the merch of the team, basically.
Absolutely. And you go on any website now that's worth their salt on YouTube, and they'll all have their own merchandise that they're wanting you to buy. And it's a big thing now, and because it's quite cheap, all right, to produce, that's what they're wanting. They're wanting you to show your loyalty. And if you are loyal to that particular brand, whatever the brand is, then you're more likely to pay the price for it. Even though it's probably ridiculously cheap to make, you're probably prepared to pay a whole lot of money for it. And it's similar with things like reward cards. If you've got a Starbucks card, all right, well, you know that if you keep going, you get the bonus points. So you've got a choice between these different cafes. Oh, there's a Starbucks, we'll go there because we've got a card. Yeah. Your air miles, well, we're only going to use this particular airline because we get the frequent flyer miles from that particular airline. We use something else, we don't get them. Even if you're never likely to, and this is quite often the case, you're never likely to actually use the frequent flyer miles, the air miles, because you need to have huge numbers of them for it to actually be worth anything. But you become loyal because of that. And again, producers, businesses, they know this. This is one of the most common ways to get you to buy their product. And you become quite inelastic in your decision making because you've got the card. You're loyal. Yeah. The next one is this idea of the breadth of the product category, which sounds, I tell you, I prefer toast than bread. But the breadth of the product category is about how big, how much of a range there is of particular products. So, for example, if you go to the petrol station and they've got just one type of petrol, well, you know, there's a difference between that kind of petrol station and a petrol station that's got all different types, and this one's got soap in it, and this one says this, and this one's environmentally friendly, and this one does, yeah? Lots of different ones. So the more variety there is, the more elastic your response will be because you've got all of those choices that you can possibly take. And then there's this next one. This one's quite an incredible one as well. Who actually pays for it? And this is quite interesting. If you take business people, for example, and maybe mum and dad are in this category with regards to whether they've traveled and gone business class, or you might have traveled and gone business class, and flying in those particular very expensive, right, ridiculously expensive airline seats. Yeah, but maybe it's not you paying for it. Maybe the business pays for it. So therefore, for you, you're quite inelastic to how much it costs because it's not you paying. Yeah. All right. All right. 3 more, and then we will finish for the day. And here's the first one: the awareness of and availability of substitutes. And this is about your knowledge. This is about how much information you have. Right? Are you aware of? Are there substitutes out there that you know of, that you can find? Right? And it might be that you're using the internet to do Google searches, and we want to buy a ... Well, let's do a search online to find out what there is. as you might not know. Yeah. And nowadays, if you go online, okay, some of you might be familiar with Facebook, okay, and you go onto Facebook and there are groups based around products, and people will want information about those products, and so they'll go into those groups, or there'll be a group of like-minded people, and they'll be going on to learn about and have more information about certain products. Yeah, so my son is very keen on the Lego. So am I, but you know, Lego. All right, which also is what people say when they've grabbed you. Oh, Lego. And so we have groups that we are connected to through the Facebook. All right. Gosh, I'm sounding very old saying the Facebook. And it's Lego communities. And so if we want to know things about Lego, we can go onto the Lego group because we don't know. And so that might be a way to find out information about different products, availability of, where do you get this, how do you do this, etc. So now with the internet and with all of the searching that you can do, that there's much more possibility for that, for you to find out other products that are out there. The next one is, how much do you actually spend on the product? And we used to use an example in New Zealand about something called a box of matches. Because in the supermarket that I worked in, we used to sell, well, lots of things. Quite clearly, it was a supermarket, right? We're all the good superhero shop. And boxes of matches were quite common because there were a few people in New Zealand who smoked. And so they would come in and they would buy packets of cigarettes, but also boxes of matches to light their cigarettes. Not always just cigarette smokers, other people as well. But yeah, we used to sell these boxes of matches, and they would cost, I think back then, 10 New Zealand cents to buy a box of matches. Yeah, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot of money, right? If you know, the equivalent of about 40 cents here now, it is at any rate. Back then, it's probably less than that. So you guys, you know, if it's less than 1 ringgit, do you really care how expensive it is? Possibly not. Right? And so we ended up increasing the price of the boxes of matches. They went up to 15 cents, which again doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a 50% increase in price. But in your overall income, that's not a lot of money. So you are quite inelastic in that regard. But I mean, you could increase it by 100%, 20 cents. Do you really care? No, you probably don't. You'll still buy it. Yeah. And that's what people will know. Businesses will know this. If it is something that is very cheap, they're able to increase the price of it and people will still buy it. It'll be quite inelastic. Then there's those products that are quite expensive. So things like your cars, your computers, your phones, they're quite expensive. So if the price of them was to increase by even 50%, 10% even, you might start thinking, oh, I don't know, I can afford this, let's have a look around. You might become more elastic because the percentage of your income that you were looking at spending is a lot higher on that particular product. And the last one, and this is quite an important one for a little bit later on in the course, or in this unit, in fact, and it's the nature of the product. So if it is what's called habit forming, right, or if it is addictive, if it becomes a reputed necessity, or if for you that product is a necessity. So Coca-Cola, right, because of the caffeine in it, the sports drinks, the Monster, right, the Red Bulls, all of those with the higher levels of caffeine in them, we know caffeine is an addictive substance. We know this. Starbucks knows this, okay? So therefore, it is more inelastic to you. You are more likely to buy it because you're addicted to the product. Cigarettes, another one, okay? Any product where you can encourage the people to become basically addicted to it, they're going to pay for it, okay? So if you haven't been keeping up with the news, you might have noticed that Netflix is going to be increasing their subscription charges, right? Not by much, by like $1 or so, okay? And that's for all types of their subscription memberships. Now, why are they doing that? Well, at the moment, a lot of people are in lockdown. And what they're doing in lockdown, a lot of people, is they're watching the Netflixes and they're watching the Amazon Prime videos. And so those subscription services are seeing a big increase in demand. All right. People are becoming addicted to them. It's habit then. You just, what's on Netflix? Let's see. What's on, yeah. And so people will pay for it because they kind of, in that context, have to. All right. You need a particular type of medicine. If you don't get that particular medicine, then you'll die. Well, you're gonna pay, no matter what the price. So these are all the determinants of demand. So the very last thing I'd like you to do is to have a go at explaining two. You've got about 30 seconds. Ready, go. All right, type them in. Good. Yes, well done, Angie. Well done. Absolutely right. Now, remember, I am asking and explain. I'm happy enough with a list at this point, but eventually you're going to need to be able to explain because that's the higher skill level. So remember, it's identify, explain, and then you'll be evaluating, but your evaluating will be about an application. So it will be about if they do this in this situation, will that work? Yes or no, and why? Good. Well done, Eve. Okay, Andy, that's a good idea. All right. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay, running out of time. Now, I'm going to stop here because you need to have a mental break in between this lesson and your next lesson. Please review these concepts, okay, so that we can pick up from them like that next time we meet. Okay, that will be quite important that we do. We're going to continue our investigation into elasticity. All right, this is price elasticity of demand. We're actually going to meet more elasticities. All right, and then we're going to start looking at government policies, and we're going to see effects on a market. Oh, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. And I'm going to expect that you will include your understanding of elasticity into those discussions. And a classic case study is the cigarette one that we kind of hinted at just before. So if the government decides that they don't want you consuming cigarettes, and they decide that they're going to increase the price of them, what is the impact of that? How might the government do that? Is that the right decision, etc.? All of those things are the higher level skills that you are now developing. All right. So please review the concepts, add to your glossary if need be. Email me any particular questions that you might have, but we will need to finish there. So you've got a bit of a mental break between this lesson and the next one. Otherwise, as we say in the land of my birth, he kore rā, which means goodbye for now.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank
David.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.